family. Welcome back to the Explore the Extraordinary podcast. My name is Betty, and today I'm joined by Lei. And Lei is an intuitive guide, an author, a near-death experiencer, a shared death experiencer, all around tons of mystical experiences. I'm super excited for Lei's willingness to come onto the podcast and share with our community. I have never heard her story before, so I'm going to get to hear it with all of you for the first time. I'm going to toss it right over to you to share about your experience. Thanks so much for your willingness to serve.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just grateful to be here and grateful to share my story with all of your audience. So we'll just begin. The first near-death experience was when I was 21, after the birth of my second son. It had been a normal but active pregnancy, and as I was in labor, he was turning flip-flops, and they had to physically reach up inside of me and turn him around many times. This was extremely painful. I do not blame them for anything that happened afterward. It was a very stressful situation. He did make it into the world. And as in 2 days later, about 2 days later, I came down with an extremely high fever. I saw it on the thermometer. It was 111 Celsius, no, 111 Fahrenheit or 44 Celsius. Sorry about that. So it was really, really high. And I was not very mobile. And I was on the hospital bed. And I sat up. Of course, I was, and I felt nothing. There was no pain. There was no emotion, nothing. I just sat up, turned around and looked back, and there on the bed was my body. And I floated out into darkness, extreme darkness. There was no perceiving anything, but it was warm. It was loving. It was non-judgmental. It was supportive. It was the most wonderful feeling in the world. And I was like, this is just wonderful. And I floated through what seemed like it might be a tunnel. And then I got to something that seemed like a widening. And when I got there, the feeling was the same. It was just so blissful. And I'm still fine. And then a voice, which I perceived as male, came and asked me a question. And he said, do you want to come now? And it was the most gentle, kind, non-judgmental voice. And at that second, just a fraction of a second, I realized what he was asking me and that I needed to answer it. And for a moment, I just panicked. And I said, I can't. I have 2 children to raise. And then I perceived a nod of the head. And I floated back down. Just instantly floated back down. He was not judging me at all. It was, okay, that's your choice. And I floated back down and I popped back in my body and the fever broke and I was out of the hospital the next day. But I realized I had been empowered to make the choice. I was here for a reason. I had a purpose in being here. And I knew that I was empowered, which I carried with me the rest of my life. However, having been raised in a very strict Catholic family, this is back before technology, before computers, before the internet, all of this. And I had no idea what had just happened. So I pushed it down inside of me and I just forgot about it for decades. But it wasn't going to go away. It would come back, and it would come back with other near-death experiences and near-death-like experiences. The next near-death experience was several decades later, and I was again very sick with a very high fever, and it's summertime in Hawaii, and it's the hottest part of the year. And I'm covered in every blanket, every bit of clothing, everything I could because I was so cold and I was still shivering. So it was a very high fever. And I'm sitting there on the bed, not doing much. And I just, for a moment, just, okay, let go. And I went somewhere. And I don't know where I went. But it was very non-distinct a kind of a brown, gray, pink, orange kind of light. Can't see anything. It's like foggy, only it's not wet and it's warm, and it's just the same blissful feeling. And I'm standing there, or I'm being there in whatever fashion I was there. And I realized there was a bunch of beings around me, a whole lot of them. And I don't know who they were or what they were because I couldn't see anything. But they were chanting to me. And they chanted over and over and over, "You have done what you came here to do." And first I'm like, oh yeah, this is wonderful. This is great. Oh, this feels good. Oh, this is fine. What? And at that moment, I'm back in my body. And I'm like, wait a minute. If I have done what I came here to do, why am I still here? And at that moment, I started trying to, as the fever broke and I started to be able to at least move. And I was extremely, extremely weak. I started thinking, well, if I've done here what I've come here to do, my time may be short. So maybe I should prepare for this. So I did all of the physical things, like making sure it would be as easy as possible for whomever was left behind. But I also started, how do I die well? How do I do this? And the best person I could find to teach me this was Ram Dass, who at that point in time was still in form here. But I didn't meet him. But I studied everything he had, absolutely everything, whether it was about dying or not. And he was my first real teacher. Well, I'm sitting on the couch one day, and because I can't do much, but I can't move very well, only a little bit. And I'm sitting on the couch looking out my front door and through the carport. And on the other side of the carport, there is just trees and forest, and there's nothing, there's no paths, there's nothing. But I saw a being walking by. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. And I noticed that the being was wearing a white robe and was had shaggy, kind of curly hair and a shaggy, kind of curly beard. And I thought, oh, that's Ram Dass. Now, this is after he had passed. He passed on December 23rd. And this was on December 25th. And so I see him walking by my carport, on the far side of my carport. And as I noticed it was him, he kind of turned toward me and went, yeah, it's me. And I'm like, whoa. And so after he walked on by, I gathered up the strength and I went out. And there, under a mango tree in December, which is not fruiting season, on the ground were 4 perfectly shaped, perfectly ripe, unbruised, unblemished guavas in the shape of a diamond. He'd left me a gift as he walked by. So I'm like, why did he do this? And I realized in his crossover, in his transformation, in his leaving form, whatever you want to call it, I had known that what he really wanted us to do was not grieve for him. He wanted us to not only be with, but also to celebrate the freedom he now had. He wanted us to celebrate his transformation, because as he taught so many times, there is no death. There is only becoming more your fullness in the oneness, in the energy that is everywhere. And so he wanted us to celebrate that, and I did. And that's why he visited me. So as I went along after this and I'm healing from all of this, there came a point in time when I realized that even though I was able to do a lot to help people or guide people right at that moment, that there was something holding me back. And so I started looking at how could I heal whatever it was, and figured out, yeah, it was my relationship with my mother. She had started having children at 16. She was She had 6 of us in 7.5 years. She had some mental issues. She was overwhelmed, very angry, and just, it was not a pleasant childhood at all. And I carried a lot of scars from it, especially the time when she almost killed me. And I thought, okay, I need to do something with this, but I don't know what. And a friend of mine, or somebody that I know and follow, had said that she had had a similar background, and that she had found a way to see her parents as loving her enough to give her the foundation to become who she needed to be. And I thought, oh, that's great for you, but that's not me. So I'm going along and I still can't find it. So finally I said to everything, nothing, or whatever you want to call it, I just asked, how do I heal this? Instantly, I saw myself in a theater. There was no one in the theater. The lights are dark, and I'm the only person in there, in the middle row, in the middle of the second row. So I'm right up front. I'm like, okay. Well, then the director comes out on the stage in front of me, and the director is me. And then I noticed back up in the booth behind me, the producer is also me. And then I noticed that the actor is me. Oh, and sitting beside me is the scriptwriter, who is also me. And I thought, huh. And as the play went along, as the actor, I noticed that all the other people in my life play are also actors. And that includes my mother. And I came to the realization that she loved me so much that before we came into this life form, we had made an agreement that she would do what she did out of love so that I could become the person I needed to be. And the other side of that was that once I knew that, the script writer could rewrite any part of the script. I could change, not the events. The events still happened, but I could change completely how I looked at them, the feelings around them, all of it. And so I was in a state of great bliss after that vision, which went on for a few months. Now understand, as I say this next part, my mother spent the last 15 years of her life in prison for the murder of my sister-in-law. I hadn't seen her in over 20 years, had no contact with her. I had healed the wounds, and I was able to move on in joy and bliss, but I'd had no contact with her. Okay, a few months after the healing was complete, I just woke up one morning, and instead of being in the bliss, I was just jittery, and it was like I'd had way too much coffee, and it was like almost painful, and I could not function, and it was just like, ah! I had no idea what was going on. And I tried every method possible I could find. I tried teas, I tried warm baths, I tried everything. Nothing touched it, nothing. And then after 3 days, I woke up and I felt the greatest bliss, freedom, joy that I could ever imagine for no apparent reason. Well, the only contact the institution she was in had was my brother, who was completely cleared and exonerated of having anything to do with the murder. But because he was the former spouse of this person, he was the contact for my mother. Well, a little later in the day, he called me and he said, I have to tell you, our mother died this morning. And I told him what I'd been through and realized that I had shared that experience with her. Now, I didn't have a term for that. just as when I had the near-death experiences, I didn't have terms for them. These things all happened. I had no idea they existed or what they were. But I had shared her crossing with her. And we now have a better relationship than we ever had when she was in form. But I was the only one who was able to share her crossing because I had done the work to be able to heal the wounds. And so going on from that, I am also a channel for they call themselves the wisdom keepers of lost civilizations, or the wisdom keepers for short. And they had come to me and shown me themselves, actually, so I know what they look like. But there came a point in time when they were taking me through a process, and I didn't know exactly what the process was at the time. But as the process went on, I was given to know that I was going through leaving form painlessly, in ease, and even bliss, like so many of the gurus do. But the point was, for me as a common person, not someone who meditated for 30 years, to be able to see that this process was not only something we could do, but that it is actually our birthright. And so they took me all the way through this blissful time, lightening my energy, all of this, to the very moment when I would have left. And then they had me come back. Now, if you felt this bliss, this freedom, and you know that it's right there in front of you, and it's taken away from you, it was extremely hard for me to come back. I was like, why did I have to come back? And I was not very pleasant at that point in time. But they gave me to know that the reason I came back, and they gave me a very visceral showing of this, was to bring this to the people, because the way that we have been indoctrinated to believe that you have to have, in order to leave form, it has to be painful, it has to be a long drawn out process, or it has to be something that is not desired, like, you know, it could be instant, but that would be like in a car accident or something like that. They're saying no, it can be peaceful, it can be calm, and it can be at the choice of when we decide we are done with what we've come here to do. And so that is what I have that I wanted to share with your audience.
Thanks so much, Lei. I really appreciate your story. I know that you can see me, but I'm edited out while we're recording, but I was making all sorts of faces. Your story is incredible, just absolutely incredible. And to hear the contrast of this story too. And I loved being able to hear about your being able to break out of victim mentality. I think that's honestly, I think that's one of the biggest goals of the human experience when we sign up for these really challenging life lessons, is to break out of that victim mentality and the freedom that comes along with it. You said that, you know, we're actors in the play of Earth, and that the script writer can rewrite. And I loved how you phrased it. Rewrite the emotions, rewrite the perspective, can't rewrite the actual scenario. Yes, of course that happened, but we don't have to be bound to the way that we saw it once. We can transform the way that we see it. So I just heard you say in this last part that, you know, you were angry that you had to come back. And even though they've given you a reason with why you had to come back, and I'm so grateful that you're showing up for your mission and that you're sharing, how did you get acclimated to being back here after having so many of these spiritual experiences, feeling all of that bliss? How do you find that temperance between the two worlds? I think a lot of our audience would appreciate hearing that.
Well, the first thing that they did to bring me back, I was not exactly depressed, but I was really close to depressed after they made me come back. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, why did I have to come back? All of a sudden, this lovely young gal that I've never met, I don't know her name, anything, she shows up on my doorstep. Now I live in the boonies. I don't live like, there's not a whole lot around me. And it's not like a place that somebody would just kind of show up to. And she showed up knocking on my door. She's got blood on her legs and her arms, and she looks like she's really been through a mess, but you can see that she is just beautiful. Anyway, and she said, she's like, can I come in? Can I come in? Can I use your phone? Can I? And so I let her come in and use my phone to call her aunt. And her aunt didn't answer. And so I said, would you like to sit down and tell me what's going on? And so she sat down, and I gave her a bottle of water, and she told me her entire story, and it was not at all pleasant. It was horrible. And so I was like, well, what would you like to do? And she had come to the point after she told me her story that the only way for her to have safety would be to go to the police and tell them her story, which implied that she was also part of this criminal activity. So she'd have to put herself in that position, but she was willing to do that to get to the place where she could be in safety. So I took her up to the police station. And as I'm driving back, I'm realizing that's it. I'm here to be of service to other people. And so I take everything that has happened to me and I turn it around to be in service in whatever way I possibly can, to the best of my ability, to other people, to humanity, to especially transformation and change. And that's how I've melded the two different parts of my being, or however you would like to change the different feelings and the different ways of being. That's how I've done it.
That's really helpful. It's bringing something up for me that after my own spiritual experience, I thought, yes, the same thing, like I'm here to be of service, but I had no discernment. And so I thought telemarketers who were calling me to scam me out of my money, I was like, oh, God, sending these people to me to help me create abundance. But I just remember not having the tools for discernment. But it sounds like that's something that you have been able to cultivate over your time of having all these spiritual experiences.
The wisdom keepers have actually been working with me for many years to be able to be a channel. You know, some people become a channel fairly quickly, and the physical process is extremely difficult. I've been being worked on, I realize now, I didn't at the time, for all of these years, even since my first NDE. And so they've had a lot of time to get me ready and teach me the tools. You know, they would come to me once in a while here and there. And, you know, so people will now ask me, well, what methods do you use? And I'm like, I've got a tool belt. There's so many of them. And whenever I am working with someone or guiding someone, the right tool will come out at the right time for whatever they need at that moment. So it was much easier for me to make this transformation because it's been going on for a very long time.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I love that you're talking about having a whole arsenal of tools to assist you in integration and discernment and temperance and all of those things that are so important after coming back from a spiritual experience. So you mentioned that you have a really conscious connection with the other side and your guides. And I'm wondering if you can maybe share a little bit about what the process was like coming into a state of trusting those voices or these experiences.
Okay. Obviously, with my background and my history with my mother, I was not ready for this at first. In fact, I spent a major portion of my life feeling like I was swimming across the ocean alone, by myself, no help. And that's not a very nice place to be. It's extremely difficult and very challenging. But as I started to work through this and they came to me, and you know, it would be like, even after my first NDE, people would come to me because I had a very calming presence. And even at that point in time, as they were talking to me, some sentence, some little verb, something would come out of me, a little piece of whatever. And it would, to me, it would seem like it was very simple, but they would turn around and say, oh, that's just what I needed to hear, or thank you so much for me for that. That gives me such peace, or whatever. They would come back to, I'm like, okay, whatever. I don't know that I did anything. Well, as time went on, I could feel their energy in these. And I could, right before they would speak through me, there would come this energy. Whoosh, and I'm like, oh, here it comes. Okay. and I would say whatever it was. And people would still continue to say, you know, that was just exactly what I needed to hear at the time. And how do you come up with those one-liners? And I'm like, they come through me. I don't know. I can take no credit. And so it just evolved, and it evolved in a very slow process from being completely alone to never being alone. They are with me always. They are with me now, and they are helping bring through to me what is in the best interest of the audience. In fact, before I get on camera, each and every time, whether it's with one person or thousands of people, I say this little blurb: please bring through me the perfect words in the perfect amount at the perfect time in the perfect way for all those who will hear and for the highest good of all. And they're always there. Of course, they can be with me as I'm out, you know, if I'm out picking berries and I ask something like, you know, how can I find all the ones that are on the ground? They might say something simple like, why don't you put on your glasses? You know, which is, it's really simple. But at the same point in time, they come up with these extremely profound things also, like leaving form in ease and grace. And I'm never, never, never alone. And so to go from completely alone or feeling that way, I realize now I never was. They were always there supporting me, protecting me, helping me. But now it's out in the open. It's like knowing that the friends that you always had but didn't realize were there were always there.
Wow, that's a really beautiful way of phrasing it. I'm wondering how you feel. Do you think that everybody has access to this internal guidance, to being able to access their guides?
I think they do if they want to, and if they're willing to admit that it's possible. I think I know we all have a multitude of supporters behind us, around us, helping us. If we didn't, we'd never survive. But I also know that as we were in a meeting before we came into form with these supporters, that we chose exactly, you know, there would be these events that would happen. Some things we can change. We do have free will, and we can change a lot about how we feel about them. But these events still happen. They are still there supporting us, helping us through all of this, and always have been and always will be. And if we see them and allow them, ask them to come in and be with us, we're much more likely to be able to contact them. Will everybody be a channel? Probably not, but they can be a channel for their own messages, even if they cannot be a channel for something that's a little more grand.
Wow, I love that. Yeah, I often say to people that our guides are like customer service agents. It only works if you call the customer service agency. Like, it won't just work otherwise. I love that you kind of framed it in the same way. And I do think that that help is available to all of us as well. So another thing that you brought up again was about this movie where you're actually in charge of all these different roles of the movie. And this is kind of like the $1 billion question, but what do you think the purpose of the Earth movie is? Or maybe even just to get more personal, your movie?
Okay. What's going on here, I think, is behind the question is, what about karma? Well, I'm responsible for my karma. I am not responsible for anybody else's karma, how it comes out, or if it gets taken care of. I don't know if my mother had other karma that she was trying to heal through doing all of that. Um, I've heard it said that we all have been all, I mean, we're all one. Everything is all one. And we have all been everything. We have been the dictator, as well as the slave, as well as the I don't want to say king, but I want to, we've had both the opulent, abundant lives, we've had the less abundant lives. And at the same point in time, we are all constantly, always in abundance. But this is our, you said it as a movie, that's, or a hologram even. All of this is what we make of it. All of this is how we imagined it and have imagined it. All of our lifetimes, past, present, and lifetimes of everyone else, everything else, it's all one. It's all part of us. Every bit of it is part of us and part of all of us at the same time. And we cannot be separated from it. But we can have an individual experience, which is what we're here to do. And the whole point of the individual experience is to find and live in oneness, unity with everything.
Well said. Really well said. That's so beautiful. Wow. Yeah, I'm wondering, I heard you say that Ram Dass is one of your main spiritual teachers. I'm wondering, have you found any other spiritual teachers, or are there any other books or any other things that influence you that really help you solidify that awareness of oneness and finding the divine light?
There have been so many. I think I've studied with just about everybody that's out there at some point in time. I went through Eckhart Tolle. I went through, who else did I go through? There's been so many of them. I don't read books anymore. I don't feel like I need to anymore. I'm to the point where I understand that everything is a method. And if the method works for you, fantastic, use it as long as it does. But be ready to understand that if you use a method too long, it can become a trap. And if it becomes not helpful to you anymore, let the method go. And so I have pretty much let all the reading of the books go. I occasionally listen to an occasional something on YouTube. RJ Spina is really good. Next Level Soul is wonderful for anybody who's looking for something. This podcast, all of the podcasts, if they're helpful to you, make use of them. If they help you to transform and move forward, fantastic. Use it, whatever it happens to be.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I think people are very into getting some tangible tools, like who, what, where, when, tell me how that I can experience something like what you experienced. You don't have to die to experience this kind of transformation. There's tools out there. So I really appreciate you saying that. I'm wondering if maybe real quick, you can share about, you talked about your mom having this shared death experience, and your mom did some pretty, what we would consider contrasted experiences here on earth with the death of your sister-in-law. Do you feel like your mom went to a bad place, or do you believe in anything like condemnation? Do you still have communication with your mom on the other side?
I know for a fact that when she left, she moved into freedom and bliss. And there's no question about that at all. None. I was there with her as she went there. And I was there experiencing it with her as she started into that blissful realm. So do I think do I believe in a harsh place? Only if we choose to go there and make that. But I don't think it's necessary. We are all here to experience. We are all part of the oneness, whatever you want to call it, in whatever form you want to call it. And that oneness can only create in love. And so I don't think any of us is created to go to something that is horrible. We may be able to create that in our own minds, but that's not where we go when we leave form.
Thank you for that. I find that so hopeful. Although you'll see a lot of comments on other near-death experience posts, and some people can get pretty mad about that. I guess because of the idea that we're taught one thing for so long, and then people who have experiences come back and they contradict that thing that's been grilled into people's minds for so long. And so the closed-mindedness comes up against a new idea, and it can, people can react in a not so nice way. So I really appreciate you sharing that piece of information. And I really appreciated hearing your story and getting to know you. I want to see if there's anything else that you feel called to share about before we end our time together today.
Only that if you look at any of the quote organized religions or the tenets of what they teach, if you look at the kernel of what they teach, what they really teach, I mean, the heart, it's pretty much the same for all of them. And basically it says, I'll put it in ones that seem for one place. Love one another as I have loved you, and be in love always. And that's about all there is to it. You could do that through Buddhism, which is non-resistance, non-attachment, non-judgment. You can do it in any one of them, and it comes up to the same thing. Live in love, and you will have a wonderful life.
Very beautiful. Thank you so much, Lei. Lei's links will be in the liner notes of this episode. So if you want to get in communication with Lei, please do. And we'll see you next time.